Morning, everybody. Happy April, whatever, in COVID-19 land. So we're I'm currently here with Nat and the kids at about 400 miles west of the DFW area in Lubbock, where we're kind of doing our shelter in place just like everyone else. I know everybody's been displaced, and it hasn't been fun, but the reality is we're doing what we can. Hopefully we'll get past this and get back to our lives. Hopefully everybody's following the rules so that we can get this to a point where I hate flatten the curve, because everybody says flatten the curve, but the reality is as soon as we can get the numbers down and get the trend down, I think we can start lifting restrictions and everybody can start getting at least somewhat back to what they're doing. So I do a lot of cooking, and there's one of the things that I make that people have asked over and over again is my poached eggs. I've got it doesn't do good for a crowd. I would do sous vide eggs if I'm going to do eggs for a crowd, but to make one or two or three or four maybe perfectly poached eggs, if I could tell them how to do it. And so my promise to them was that I would make a poached egg video with my lovely wife Natalie helping me make this. I'm gonna try to put together just a really quick one. No silly music or anything like that. It's literally going to be 100% tutorial on how I do it. It's not the way. There are lots of ways to do it. The way that I do it works every single time. So I hope you get something out of it. If there's one or two things you can take from it, that's cool. But I'm going to go over my entire process and method to getting good poached eggs. Sound good? Let's get started. So, I'll tell you a little bit first about how I have my setup. I need a place to put eggshells. I toasted some bread earlier, and I'm going to throw this plate away anyway, so it's a great place to put it. I have my eggs ready. I have a bowl that I'm going to drain my liquid white. I'll explain all that in a minute. I have water that's it's a simmer. It's a very, very light simmer. It's not boiling. It doesn't ever need to be boiling. It doesn't ever need to be more than it is right now. I have something to agitate my water with. This I'm going to use to gently take out my my poached egg. So let's talk about the water. Oh, and one more very important piece. When you're going to serve these is going to determine what you do with them afterward, okay? If I'm getting ready for service, as soon as I get finished cooking, I'm going to put them in a warm water bath. This is just really, really hot tap water is all it is. And what I'm going to do is when I finish with the egg, I'm going to drop it in the water. It's going to keep it warm. A lot of people don't know that you can poach eggs for the week. Even poach them the night before. If you want to do breakfast the next morning, you can poach eggs the night before, put them back in warm water. The difference between if I'm going to use them now as opposed to later is I would use an ice water bath to shock them to where they're completely the cooking process completely stops and it's cold. I'm going to take them and put them right in the fridge for tomorrow or the next day, or I can do a whole bunch of them ahead of time, and I can have some each day. We're going to have breakfast here in a little bit because I found some really awesome English muffin bread at the store. So what we're going to do, I've toasted that ahead of time. I've found some really nice Black Forest ham. I got some Munster cheese. That all that's at the ready. All I need are the eggs, and I'm going to make hollandaise too when I get finished with the eggs. So out of the same pot, using the water is kind of a double boiler. So it's kind of the last step in the process. Anyway, so today we're going to use them as soon as we're done. So I'm going to put them in a warm water bath, and as soon as I get ready to scoop them out, I'll scoop them out right onto where I plate. So very important. Where most people think about how to cook them, you don't think about how to hold them. Second really important piece, if you're going to use I use a vortex method if I'm going to do just a few really nice pretty eggs. You don't need a pot this big to be able to cook one egg. What happens is, and this is where a lot of people go wrong with their with their vortex, is they start in a pot this big, they get their vortex running, and in a big pot you have a lot of water. Water has mass, and now it's also got force because I've agitated it. Drop the egg in, the water, as it starts to disperse from its vortex, will tear your white from your yolk, and it kind of starts to separate. You don't need that much water because you don't need that much mass. You're only cooking one egg at a time. So cook it in a tall, narrow saucepan. That way you can control it. Second tip, the egg. I'm gonna crack it. Put it in a fine mesh strainer. What happens is, when an egg is farm fresh, just as soon as it's made, it's got primarily two components. It's got the yolk, and it has a firm white. As the white ages, as the egg itself ages, the white that is firm will kind of start to, the proteins will denature and it'll actually turn into liquid. What that is basically water. So what we're going to do is if you've ever tried to just crack an egg straight into your water to try and poach, that stringy light stuff that gets everywhere and makes a big mess of your water, it's that. So what we want is only the firm white and the yolk. So my poached egg is only going to consist of this right here. So once that's strained off, I'm going to get, in fact, I'm going to put that right there for just a second. And I'm going to start my water in a vortex. It doesn't have to be crazy. I use a whisk because if you use a spoon, sometimes if you get the kind of a weird angle, it'll splash out. So I use a whisk so it will gently start to move the water. Inside that vortex, the egg is going to go really quickly. Now, I don't touch it once it's in there until it has set. Now, have a look. It is almost perfectly shaped. Don't worry about the stuff. I'm going to show you how to get rid of the other stuff later. Now you see how the egg starts to set. It's not sticking to the bottom. It's cooking. All on its own. In the time that it was in the vortex, the white wrapped around the yolk just perfectly. Now, I don't touch that egg until the skin forms and it starts to coagulate. I've added a tablespoon of vinegar to this water because the vinegar will help the white coagulate faster. And that's what I want. So that egg is not sticking and it's not floating. So I'm gonna just leave it right there and let it do its thing. About 3.5 minutes, for me, is a perfectly poached egg. Now it's not quite floating, but it's not touching the bottom, which is what I don't want. I don't want it sticking to the bottom. Now, in order to keep mine, kind of a double down effort to make sure it doesn't stick to the bottom, before I even put water in it, I put just a little bit of coconut oil, and you can put any sort of oil on the bottom. And what that'll do is it'll kind of form just kind of a light barrier. It'll help keep your eggs from sticking. See, I'm trying to mess with it a little bit so you can see, but basically it's cooking on its own. It's doing a great job. Now I'm going to leave it for 3 minutes without touching it. After that 3 minutes, I'm going to start checking it, I like mine just like a light, creamy, runny. I don't want it almost raw, and I don't want it congealed. I want it kind of just a light, almost not quite a custard. So now it's been about 3 minutes. I'm gonna take that. I'm gonna put it in my water. That's it. Now, one thing I will say is, if that wisp, that shouldn't bother you because it's an egg. I mean, let's face it, it's food. It's not perfect. It's made by nature. But if that bothers you, what you can do is when you get ready to serve it, I have scissors that I can actually use to cut the little wisps off. Personally, that egg is almost perfect. So I wouldn't mess with it at all. It's beautiful. It's food. It's going to make a really nice Benedict here in a little bit. So there you go. People have asked. I've shown you. There are a lot of ways to do poached eggs, just like there are a lot of ways to cook anything. But the way I've shown you is the way that I do it that gets great results every single time for, 5 or less eggs, or maybe 6 or less. Sometimes I'll have 2 pans going and I'll be able to I'll be able to kind of double my production, and it doesn't take that long to do. But if you do it like this, it'll work every single time. I hope it works for you. Take care. Thanks.